So it's often said that Diana wasn't exactly happy after marrying Charles. But what was her life like before all that? Apparently, her single days were a lot more laid back than many people think. Even though she came from a wealthy background, Diana was pretty down to earth and didn't have the grand ambitions that people might imagine. Let's take a look at her life before she became Princess Diana. The Spencer family was well known in British high society, but Diana herself wasn't exactly born into the aristocracy. Still, she spent much of her early life close to the royal family, which set the stage for her future as the Princess of Wales. Diana grew up at Park House, located on the Sandringham estate, a place owned by the royal family. This meant she was around royals from a young age, so it was kind of normal for her to be around that world. Her father, John Spencer, worked as an equerry to Queen Elizabeth II, which meant he was a personal assistant to the Queen herself. This brought the Spencer family even closer to the royal circle. Diana's upbringing was steeped in British upper-class traditions, and she was no stranger to royal expectations. In fact, according to the biography The Diana Chronicles, Diana's ties to the royal family were pretty strong. Queen Elizabeth was actually her younger brother's godmother, showing how close the families were. Diana also had childhood memories of playing with Prince Andrew, even hosting tea parties with him, which gives a glimpse into her early connection with the royals. Royal biographer Ingrid Seward explains that Diana had been around the royal family for as long as she could remember because her family lived on the Sandringham estate, and her dad worked closely with the Queen. This unique upbringing meant Diana was familiar with the royal way of life long before she became a part of it. Even though she wasn't born an aristocrat, Diana had a natural grace that didn't go unnoticed. Her friends and family nicknamed her Duck, short for Duchess, because of how poised and graceful she was. Darren McGrady, who used to be the royal chef, remembers this nickname fondly, saying Diana always carried herself like royalty, even before she was officially part of the family. That elegance would later become one of her defining qualities as Princess of Wales. Mary Clark, who served as a nanny for Princess Diana during her childhood, offers a really personal look at Diana's early years in her book, Little Girl Lost: The Troubled Childhood of Princess Diana. Despite the somewhat gloomy title, Clark paints a much more positive picture of Diana's younger days. According to Clark, Diana had a largely happy and secure childhood filled with laughter and love. Clark remembers Diana as a joyful, helpful little girl who was adored by both of her parents, particularly her dad, who saw her as the apple of his eye. This warm description contrasts with the more troubled image we often hear about Diana later in life. While her adult years were filled with personal struggles and intense public attention, her childhood was full of love and happiness. Diana and her younger brother Charles were very close, often playing together in a sibling bond full of affection and fun. Diana's days were pretty structured, with a routine that helped give her stability. For instance, she always went to bed at 8 p.m. This consistency in her daily life gave her a sense of security. Clark also describes Diana as a lovely child with a sweet, shy charm. She had that classic English rose look, rosy cheeks and a gentle downward glance that would later become one of her signature, endearing traits. But Diana wasn't just about being sweet and pretty. She had a real love for the outdoors and wasn't keen on traditional feminine clothing. Clark recalls that Diana was happiest when she was outside, wearing a pair of old trousers and a top. She wasn't interested in dresses or skirts and would often resist dressing up, questioning the point of it all. This preference for comfort over fashion showed that even as a child, Diana had a rebellious, independent streak that set her apart from the typical image of an aristocratic girl. Clark vividly remembers Diana's protests about being forced to dress up, with the young girl often asking, "Do I really have to do this? I don't see why it matters what I'm wearing. No one's going to look at me." This shows how Diana, even as a child, had a strong sense of self and preferred substance over superficiality. This attitude would become a defining feature of her public persona later in life, making her seem down to earth and relatable to the public. Diana's love for animals was another key part of her childhood. Clark fondly recalls how Diana was especially attached to her guinea pigs and dog, spending hours looking after and playing with them. This wasn't just a passing childhood phase. It was a lasting passion that Diana carried into adulthood, where she became known for supporting animal welfare causes. Her bond with her pets provided her with comfort and companionship, reflecting her caring and nurturing nature. In addition to her affection for animals, Diana was also quite the sportswoman. Her former music teacher, Penny Walker, remembers her as being really good at sports, showing her energetic and competitive side. Whether running around the playground or taking part in school sports events, Diana's athleticism was one of her defining traits as a young girl. This physical skill highlighted her determination and dedication, qualities she would later bring to her charity work and public life. But perhaps one of the most defining parts of Diana's youth was her passion for dance. Dance wasn't just a hobby or fleeting interest for her. It was a profound part of her identity, something that gave her purpose and joy. From a young age, Diana dreamed of pursuing dance as a career, feeling an innate connection to the art form. She often mentioned as a teenager that she would have loved to be a professional dancer, something she was passionate about, though she never had the opportunity to fully pursue it. Her love for dance was so deeply embedded in her that it became a refuge, a place where she could lose herself and find both emotional release and a sense of freedom. Her former ballet teacher, Anne Allen, recalled that Diana had dance in her soul. Allen observed that whenever Diana danced, there was a visible spark in her, a joy that radiated from her every movement. You could see the pure joy it brought her, Allen said, noting that Diana was not just technically skilled but deeply moved by the art form. For Diana, dance was not merely about performing steps or showcasing technique. It was a personal language, an emotional outlet, and an intimate form of expression. It allowed her to articulate what words couldn't, to express her inner world in a way that felt freeing and authentic. Interestingly, Allen also suggested that Diana's devotion to dance might have served as a form of coping mechanism in response to the emotional complexities of growing up in a high-profile and often tumultuous family. Amidst the challenges she faced at home, particularly the strain between her parents that eventually led to their divorce, dance offered Diana a sanctuary. It was a space where she could channel her feelings and frustrations in a productive and therapeutic way, helping her navigate the emotional turbulence of her childhood. For Diana, dance was more than just grace or performance. It was a lifeline, a source of comfort, and a means of dealing with the pressures that weighed heavily on her young heart. Diana's childhood, as idyllic as it may have seemed on the outside, was far from perfect. One of the most difficult and formative experiences in her early years was witnessing the breakdown of her parents' troubled relationship, which ultimately ended in divorce. This emotional upheaval left a lasting mark on her, and the pain of those years undoubtedly shaped the woman she would become. Throughout these challenging times, dance provided a much-needed outlet. It was a way for her to process her emotions, anger, sadness, confusion, through the fluidity of movement. When the world around her seemed too overwhelming, the rhythm and grace of dance allowed her to temporarily escape and find peace, even if just for a moment. As she continued to grow, dance became a symbol of her strength and resilience, offering her solace during some of the darkest moments of her youth. The art form helped her to cope, to heal, and to regain a sense of control over her life. It was, in many ways, her refuge, a place where she could be her truest self and feel, even if just for a time, like the world outside didn't matter. In this way, dance wasn't just a part of Diana's life. It was an integral thread in the fabric of her emotional and personal growth, one that would stay with her long after she left the stage of her youth. Wendy Mitchell, one of Diana's dance teachers, described how the ballet studio was a place where Diana could truly shine, a sanctuary where she could escape the pressures of her social status and just be herself. Dance allowed Diana to excel, to find peace, and to express herself freely away from the public eye. It was a space where her natural grace and dedication could flourish without the constant scrutiny she faced in the outside world. However, despite her passion for ballet, Diana couldn't pursue it professionally. Standing at 5'11", she was much taller than the average professional ballerina, who is usually around 5'5". This physical limitation was heartbreaking for Diana, as it dashed her dream of becoming a professional dancer. The ballet world's strict physical criteria made it impossible for her to follow that path, a reality highlighted by Reader's Digest. Beyond her love for dance, Diana's childhood took a more difficult turn when her parents separated when she was just 7 years old. This event had a lasting impact on her emotional well-being, shaping her relationships and emotional struggles throughout her life. Diana's nanny, Mary Clark, shared in Diana at 65 how deeply the separation affected her, saying that Diana was the most disturbed of all the children by the split. Diana's behavior changed noticeably after the divorce. Clark remembers how Diana began acting out, doing things like locking nannies in bathrooms or putting their clothes on the roof. These acts could be seen as her way of trying to regain some control over her chaotic surroundings, perhaps driven by a deep fear that the people she relied on would leave her, just as her mother had. This fear of abandonment would haunt Diana throughout her life, influencing her emotional health and relationships even as an adult. Diana's brother Charles also shared a touching memory of their shared experience during their parents' separation. In an interview with the Sunday Times, he recalled how he and Diana were particularly close during that time, with their two older sisters away at school. "She and I were very much in it together," he said, noting that they confided in each other. This bond between them was vital, offering each other some comfort during such a turbulent period. However, the trauma affected Diana most deeply, and she seemed to take the instability to heart more than her siblings. Charles also spoke about the contrasting roles their parents played during this difficult time. He described their father as a quiet, steady presence, always there with love. In contrast, he noted that their mother, although loving, wasn't naturally inclined toward the demands of motherhood. He explained, "It's not her fault she couldn't do it," which suggests that their mother's departure wasn't due to a lack of love, but rather her own struggles with the responsibilities of being a mother. One of the most heartbreaking moments for Diana during this period was her persistent hope that her mother would come back. Charles recalled that when their mother was leaving, she promised young Diana, who was just 5 years old, that she would return to see her. Diana would wait by the door for her mother, but she never came back. This image of Diana waiting in vain for her mother is a powerful symbol of the deep abandonment and disappointment she felt. It clearly left an emotional scar, one that contributed to her lifelong fear of being abandoned and her intense need for emotional security. In 1975, after the death of her grandfather, Diana's life took another major turn when her family moved to Althorp House. This marked the start of a new chapter, one filled with both grandeur and history. Althorp, located in Northampton, had been the Spencer family's ancestral home since 1508. The estate was massive, with 31 bedrooms, a grand ballroom, countless historical portraits, and an impressive library. Every room and corridor was steeped in history, reflecting the Spencer family's legacy. The beauty and significance of Althorp House were later immortalized in the movie The Duchess, where its opulence and timeless elegance were showcased. For Diana, this new home became the backdrop to many of her formative years, blending her family's rich history with the personal challenges she was facing. Diana's brother, Charles Spencer, shared a nostalgic look into their childhood at Althorp in the documentary Secrets of Althorp: The Spencers on YouTube. He recalled a vivid memory of Diana in the grand entrance hall, passionately practicing her tap dancing. "I remember my sister Diana in the main entrance hall. She was very keen on tap dancing. Every time I go through that hall, I can remember the clacking of the tap dancing as she practiced," Charles said. This story paints a picture of Diana as a lively young girl, expressing herself and finding joy through dance within the grand walls of their family home. Charles also reflected on the privilege of growing up in such a stunning setting, sharing his fond memories of the place. "What a wonderfully spoiling place to grow up when you've got all of this beauty and privacy and safety for children," he said, capturing the essence of the idyllic life they led at Althorp. The vast parklands of the estate were not just for show. They served as a secure, magical playground for Diana and her siblings, where they could explore the outdoors and immerse themselves in the natural beauty that surrounded them. Althorp's sprawling grounds, complete with towering trees, serene lakes, and winding paths, created the perfect environment for childhood adventures and imaginative play, fostering Diana's lifelong love for nature. The peacefulness of the estate allowed the children to experience a sense of freedom, away from the pressures of the world beyond. This tranquility, however, was contrasted by the family's emotional turmoil, with Diana and her siblings often facing personal struggles that would stay with them long after their time at Althorp. But in those formative years, the estate provided an escape, a place where Diana could reconnect with herself, surrounded by the beauty and privacy that few children of her age would experience. Years later, Althorp would take on even greater significance in Diana's life, becoming not only the place where she grew up, but also where she was laid to rest after her tragic death in 1997. The grounds, serene and timeless, were chosen as her final resting place because of their deep connection to her, a home that had witnessed so much of her early life. The historic residence and peaceful estate made it a fitting and poignant location for her burial, reflecting the life she had lived, one that had been both filled with public adoration and personal hardship. Today, visitors can tour the estate, walking through its grand rooms and beautiful gardens as they reflect on Diana's legacy in the very place she once called home. The estate stands as a tribute to her life, offering a quiet place for those who loved her to remember the woman who became known not only for her royal duties, but for her compassion and impact on the world. In 1976, Diana's father, John Spencer, remarried socialite Rain Legge, marking a significant shift in the family dynamic. The wedding was kept a secret from Diana and her siblings, and they were neither informed about it nor invited. This exclusion added to the children's sense of alienation and confusion, deepening the rift between them and their new stepmother. The strained relationship between Diana and Rain was well documented, and Diana, along with her siblings, gave Rain the unflattering nickname Acid Rain to express their resentment toward her. The animosity was mutual, and Diana's resistance to Rain's presence in their lives was clear. The children would chant, "Rain, Rain, go away," a playful yet pointed rejection of Rain's attempts to become part of their family, as reported by The Sun. Rain's entry into the Spencer family was met with fierce opposition, especially from Diana. According to Tatler, the children saw her as an intruder who threatened their already fragile family dynamic. The nickname Acid Rain wasn't just a childish tease. It reflected the deep resentment they felt toward her. Diana's loyalty to her father made it even harder for her to accept Rain, whom she viewed as an outsider rather than a supportive partner to her dad. However, the relationship started to change when John Spencer fell seriously ill. Rain's role in caring for him marked a turning point in her relationship with Diana. As Diana saw how devoted Rain was to her father, her perspective began to soften. This shift was captured in a heartfelt letter Diana wrote to Rain, thanking her for looking after her father, saying, "Daddy is so lucky to have you," as reported by the Daily Mail. This acknowledgement marked a significant step toward reconciliation, showing Diana's ability to appreciate Rain's positive influence on her father's health. But despite this newfound appreciation, the relationship remained strained and complex. In 1989, after Diana had married Prince Charles and become the Princess of Wales, a dramatic incident occurred that highlighted the unresolved tension between them. Diana reportedly pushed Rain down the stairs, an act she later admitted gave her enormous satisfaction, according to biographer Andrew Morton. This shocking moment underscored the deep-rooted resentment that still simmered beneath the surface, despite Diana's softened stance toward Rain. As a teenager, Diana's romantic dreams were laced with a sense of fairy tale idealism that many young girls of her time shared. While she didn't seriously expect to marry Prince Charles, she did have a significant teenage crush on him, which played a big part in her formative years. This infatuation was pretty common among girls her age, but for Diana, it held a special place in her heart and imagination. During her time at boarding school, she would often talk about her dream of either becoming a dancer or the Princess of Wales, as the Mirror reported. This mix of ambitions reflected her love for dance and her youthful fantasies of being part of the royal family alongside the prince. The image of a young, wide-eyed Diana speaking about her dreams paints a picture of a girl deeply immersed in the romantic ideals of her time. Diana's cousin, Diana McFarlane, offered more insight into these teenage fantasies in a documentary. She revealed that Diana's admiration for Prince Charles started when she was around 14 or 15 years old. This wasn't a passing crush. It was a deep, ongoing admiration that shaped her teenage years. McFarlane shared how, while other girls had posters of pop stars like the Monkees or Rod Stewart, Diana's room was filled with pictures of Prince Charles. "We all had posters of various pop stars we liked, But Diana? It was always pictures of Prince Charles, McFarlane said. Diana had a schoolgirl crush on him for years, as reported by The Sun. These details offer a snapshot of Diana's adolescent world, where the future Prince of Wales was a constant presence in her thoughts. You can easily picture the young Diana surrounded by images of Prince Charles, dreaming about what it might be like to meet him, let alone marry him. This infatuation was likely heightened by the constant media coverage of the royal family, which was a central part of British culture. When Diana finally met Prince Charles at 16, her teenage fantasies seemed to be becoming reality. Meeting the man she'd admired for so long must have been a huge moment for her, and it's easy to see how such an encounter could have swept her off her feet. The Prince of Wales, a figure she'd idolized, was now real and within her social circle. While Princess Diana had many admirable qualities, excelling academically was not one of them. Despite being clever and intuitive, her school years were marked by struggles with traditional education. According to The Sun, Diana failed her O-level exams twice, a significant setback in the British education system. Her struggles were compounded by her mischievous nature. Penny Walker, her music teacher, fondly remembered Diana as someone who was often slightly in the background with a smile on her face, like she was just about to do something naughty, as shared with the Mirror. Diana's mischievous streak was a hallmark of her school years, reflecting a spirited personality that sometimes clashed with the rigid expectations of academic life. Her academic difficulties ultimately led to her leaving school at 16, after failing her exams. This decision had lasting implications on her self-perception and contributed to the insecurities that would follow her throughout her life. Royal author Mary Kenny suggested that Diana's lack of a formal education played a significant role in her feelings of inadequacy. "I think one of the problems with Diana was that she never got a proper education," Kenny explained in Woman and Home. She had a terrible inferiority complex about that and said that she was as thick as two planks. Diana's self-deprecating remarks about her academic struggles highlighted the depth of her insecurities and their impact on her self-esteem. Despite these challenges, Diana's school years were not without positive qualities. Her former headmistress, Jean Lowe, emphasized Diana's standout traits of kindness and helpfulness, noting that these qualities were more prominent than her academic intelligence. She stood out for her kindness and helpfulness rather than her academic intelligence, Lowe shared with the Mirror. These qualities foreshadowed the compassionate and empathetic persona Diana would later become known for on the world stage. After leaving school without completing her exams, Diana was sent to the Institut Alpin Vitaminette, a finishing school in Switzerland. This decision was influenced by the norms of the time, where young women from aristocratic backgrounds often attended finishing schools as an alternative to university. According to the Express, the school was seen as an appropriate environment for Diana to refine her social graces and acquire the cultural polish expected of someone of her status. However, the experience turned out to be far from ideal. The Institut Alpin Vitaminette was an elite institution, and classes were conducted entirely in French, a language Diana struggled with. Her difficulty in speaking and understanding French compounded her existing academic insecurities, making her time at the school challenging. The language barrier at the finishing school only made Diana's natural shyness more pronounced, causing her to withdraw even further. As Howard Hodson described in his 2007 biography, Charles, the Man Who Will Be King, the combination of linguistic challenges and Diana's inherent reticence made it difficult for her to connect with her classmates and teachers. Her academic performance, which had always been a struggle in English, now felt pathetic, as she grappled with the additional difficulty of completing assignments in French, according to Showbiz Cheat Sheet. Diana's time at the finishing school was marked by intense feelings of isolation and inadequacy. Rather than gaining the confidence and social skills she was meant to develop, Diana became more anxious and withdrawn. The environment that was supposed to help her flourish socially instead intensified her insecurities, and she found it hard to communicate effectively, which only deepened her sense of being out of place. Her shyness grew, and she avoided both class participation and social activities. The pressure from this isolation became overwhelming, and Diana reached out to her father in heartfelt letters, pleading with him to bring her back home. "If you love me, you won't leave me here," she reportedly wrote, revealing the depth of her distress. After leaving the finishing school in 1978, Diana moved into a modest apartment in London with three close friends, Carolyn, Anne, and Virginia. This marked a new chapter in her life, one far removed from the grandeur and expectations that would later define her royal existence. For about a year, Diana lived a life that was refreshingly down to earth, more relatable to a young woman in her early 20s than a future princess. The apartment shared with her friends became her sanctuary. The dynamics among the flatmates were close-knit, filled with camaraderie and mutual support, providing Diana with a sense of normalcy and companionship during a pivotal period of personal growth and transition. It was during this period of living in London that Princess Diana received her engagement proposal from Prince Charles. In her book, Diana, Her True Story, in her own words, Diana vividly recalled the moment with nostalgia and excitement. She described returning to her flat and eagerly sharing the news with her friends. "I came back to the flat and sat on my bed. Girls, guess what? They said, 'He asked you. What did you say?' 'Yes, please.'" Her friends reacted with a mix of joy and disbelief, screaming and howling in excitement. The trio then celebrated by driving around London, keeping the engagement a secret from the wider world for a short while. The reactions of Diana's flatmates painted a picture of pure joy and spontaneity. Carolyn, one of her roommates, was reportedly caught off guard when Diana returned with the news, and Virginia excitedly ran to fetch Carolyn to be part of the celebration. They marked the occasion with a celebratory breakfast of champagne, a reflection of the youthful exuberance and shared joy of the moment. During her time in London, Diana also embraced a more grounded lifestyle, working in roles that reflected her genuine passion for working with children. She worked as both a kindergarten assistant and a nanny, finding fulfillment in connecting with young ones and making a meaningful impact on their lives. As Diana herself shared in an interview, "I adore children. That's really why," revealing her deep affection for working with kids. One of her notable positions was as a nursery assistant at Young England Kindergarten in Pimlico, London. Diana's involvement at Young England began somewhat informally, as friends encouraged her to explore the opportunity. Initially, she worked in the afternoons, but gradually she took on more responsibility, eventually working full days, 3 days a week. Her time at the kindergarten allowed her to nurture her love for teaching and caring for children, offering a fulfilling contrast to the public life she would later lead. In addition to her work at the kindergarten, Diana also worked as a nanny, caring for a young American baby boy in the home of Mary Robertson. This role was relatively low-key, and Diana maintained a level of privacy about her personal life during this time. Diana's time as a nanny for Mary Robertson marked an interesting chapter in her life, as she initially introduced herself simply as Diana Spencer, omitting any mention of her connection to Prince Charles. This discretion allowed her to build genuine relationships without the influence of her royal background. In the Robertson household, Diana was remembered for her warmth, approachability, and the natural rapport she built with Mary. The two often engaged in casual conversations, whether it was during routine tasks like blow-drying hair or applying makeup. Diana's role in the family was one of comfort and care, and her decision to keep her royal identity under wraps during this time was a reflection of her desire to be seen as a normal person rather than a public figure. Prince Charles first met Diana when she was just 16 years old, which was too young for the conventional dating norms of the time. At that point, Diana was not involved in any serious romantic relationships, and instead spent time socializing in group settings with friends. Her friend Herbert Harry recalled that Diana was not known for dating, and was always part of social groups rather than dating individually. It was with Prince Charles that Diana's first romantic relationship began, and she was reportedly head over heels in love with him when they first started seeing each other. Before Diana entered the picture, Prince Charles had been romantically involved with Diana's older sister, Sarah Spencer. Their relationship, which began in 1977, had a natural chemistry based on shared interests in high society life. However, their romance faced challenges and ended on a sour note. Sarah Spencer was outspoken about her reluctance to marry Charles, famously saying that she wouldn't marry him even if he were the dustman or the King of England. Despite their breakup, Sarah played an important role in introducing Diana to Prince Charles. In a humorous interview, Sarah took some playful credit for being the Cupid, who helped bring her younger sister and Charles together, acknowledging her role in their eventual romance. Princess Diana's youthful days reveal a complex mix of innocence, aspirations, and challenges that shaped her character. Growing up, Diana had a whimsical idealism about love, as evidenced by her teenage crush on Prince Charles and her fairy tale dreams. However, her early life also involved considerable emotional hardship. Her parents' separation and the strained relationship with her stepmother, Rain, left lasting scars that impacted her deeply. The combination of a difficult home life and her own insecurities, especially around education, painted a picture of a young woman who, despite her external grace, carried a lot of emotional weight. Her time in London before her marriage showcased her more grounded and relatable side. Working with children as a kindergarten assistant and a nanny, Diana displayed her nurturing instincts, which would later define her royal duties. These roles allowed her to connect with people on a personal level, contrasting sharply with the public life she was soon thrust into. When she became engaged to Prince Charles, Diana, at just 19, was still very young but seemed confident in her ability to make the relationship work. Her attitude toward the age gap between her and Charles reflected a certain maturity in how she viewed love, less about age and more about connection. Her determination to succeed in her marriage, driven by her own experiences with her parents' troubled relationship, further highlights her resilience and hope that she could create something different and lasting. Overall, Diana's youth was marked by a mix of youthful exuberance and a depth of emotional complexity that would serve her well in the public eye, even as it made her personal life more difficult to navigate. Her early years were both challenging and formative, setting the stage for her later role as a compassionate and beloved figure worldwide.